In the blood-stained summer of 1943, war thundered like a storm across the belly of Europe. Germany, once roaring with confidence, was now bleeding from all directions. The Eastern Front was a frozen hell, and the western skies glowed with fire from Allied bombers. But now, a new chapter opened, one that would shake the very spine of fascism. But the Germans, they fought like wolves. Well-trained, blood-hardened, and ruthless, they turned villages into fortresses, using every street as a trap, every window as a rifle's eye. Italy, the Axis's southern limb, was about to burn. But war showed no compassion. Whole towns were reduced to ash. The ancient ruins of the Roman world stood witness to modern destruction. Allied Shermans faced off against German Panzer IVs in deadly duels, where victory lasted seconds and death came in an instant. Then Catania's German forces, knowing they couldn't hold the island forever, began a strategic withdrawal. His people had lost faith. His army had lost strength. His regime had lost its soul. And as the Allies inched closer, the walls of fascism trembled. But they didn't retreat quietly. Mines, ambushes, sniper fire. They turned their retreat into a trail of death. But the message was clear. Italy was no longer safe for fascism. Underground fighters, students, ex-soldiers, they sensed the change in the air. The time for rebellion was near. Would Germany pour in reinforcements and turn Italy into another fortress of blood? Hitler watched with growing rage and fear. The Axis alliance was breaking. And worse, the Reich's southern door was now wide open. The Allied High Command had one goal: strike at the soft underbelly of Europe. Churchill had always believed that Germany's fortress could be cracked from the south, and the moment had come. Paratroopers dropped from the sky like ghosts. Ships fired in endless volleys. The land, once sunlit and peaceful, was now a graveyard in waiting. Every town, every hill, every farm became a battlefield. The invasion of Sicily would be the beginning. But this wasn't just strategy. It was war at its most brutal, where bullets didn't just kill. They tore apart empires. As Operation Husky was launched in July 1943, 160,000 Allied troops, Americans and British, stormed the beaches of Sicily under cover of darkness. Allied troops, many young and fresh from training camps, saw war for the first time, and it was nothing like the posters. Bodies lay broken in olive groves. Blood soaked the dust and the air. The air stank of gunpowder, smoke, and fear. German and Italian defenders were caught between chaos and confusion. Morale among Italian troops had crumbled. Some deserted. Others laid down their arms. In the skies above, dogfights roared like thunder. Spitfires and Messerschmitts twisted in burning dances. On the ground, tanks clashed like iron beasts. But it wasn't just about bullets and steel. It was about terror. Sicilian civilians, caught between fire from both sides, fled their homes. Children cried under collapsed roofs. Mothers begged for mercy. Despite the horror, the Allies pushed forward. Town after town fell. Palermo was taken. Meanwhile, deep inside Rome, Mussolini's grip on power was slipping. By mid-August, the Allies had captured Sicily. The cost was high. Nearly 25,000 casualties. In the shadows, resistance movements across Italy stirred. The world, watching from afar, held its breath. What would happen next? Would Italy surrender? The war machine was still grinding. The firestorm that had devoured Hamburg was just a prelude. Across the battle-scarred landscape of Europe, the Allied war machine rolled forward with ferocity. It wasn't just a battle for land, it was a battle for the soul of the world. On the Eastern Front, Stalin unleashed Operation Kutuzov and Operation Rumyantsev, determined to smash the German bulge at Kursk. After the colossal tank clash, German forces were left bleeding. Steel wreckage littered the fields, and burnt-out panzer shells baked under the Russian sun. The myth of German invincibility was crumbling. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, Mussolini's dream of a fascist empire lay in ruins. They sabotaged railways, ambushed patrols, and passed secrets to Allied spies. Entire villages were burned, civilians were shot, children were hanged. One by one, Ukrainian cities fell: Kharkov, Dnipro, Kiev. His vision of a 1,000-year Reich had become a nightmare carved in flame and fear. German soldiers, once proud conquerors, now became hunted prey. They retreated through ruined cities, their boots soaked in snow and regret. The Gestapo hunted like wolves, leaving trails of blood wherever they went. These were not just freedom fighters. They were shadows in the night, striking terror into the hearts of occupiers. The Allies struck deep into Italy, breaching its ancient defenses. With cold precision, German paratroopers stormed Rome, seized strategic strongholds, and freed Mussolini in a daring raid on the Gran Sasso. The Allies were preparing for something bigger, something that would shake the world again. Normandy, D-Day, liberation, words that had not yet been spoken, but thundered quietly in the distance. Hitler installed him as the puppet ruler of a Nazi-controlled state. Northern Italy became another battlefield soaked in blood, where partisans and Wehrmacht clashed in brutal street-to-street warfare. On July 25, 1943, under the shadow of American and British invasion, Benito Mussolini was arrested by his own countrymen. The Duce had fallen. His once iron grip turned to dust, and Italy teetered on the edge of collapse. But Hitler would not let Italy go without a fight. In the skies, the Allied bombing campaigns intensified. Schweinfurt, Regensburg, Berlin's T's that once stood proud now trembled under the weight of relentless aerial bombardment. Thousands of American B-17 flying fortresses soared through flak-filled skies, escorted by newly deployed P-51 Mustangs. The Luftwaffe fought back with fury, but they were being bled dry. Underground resistance movements grew bolder. In France, Poland, Yugoslavia, ordinary men and women took up arms against Nazi tyranny. But for every act of resistance, the Nazis responded with terror. Back on the Eastern Front, the Red Army surged forward with merciless force. Yet, in Berlin, Hitler remained delusional. Surrounded by sycophants and lies, he ordered counteroffensives that never stood a chance. Everywhere, the noose was tightening. As 1943 turned into 1944, hope burned brighter for the enslaved, while death marched louder for the tyrants. The tides had turned, but the storm had not yet passed. As the Allies landed in Italy, they believed the worst was behind them. But what they found was a nation shattered, yet fiercely defiant. Mussolini's regime had collapsed, but the German war machine wasn't retreating. Terrain that looked peaceful from the sky became hell on earth once boots hit the ground. Mud, mines, machine guns. Even rivers had become obstacles, wide, swift, and covered by snipers. Every inch forward meant dozens of lives lost. It was regrouping. The Italian peninsula would now become a long, bloody path of attrition. In the North, German Field Marshal Kesselring was turning Italy into a fortress. A historic abbey, centuries old, sat atop a mountain overlooking the route to Rome. Screams echoed through the smoke. Medics dragged wounded through barbed wire and broken stone. For months, Monte Cassino was a meat grinder, and the world watched in horror. Mussolini had been rescued in a daring commando raid by German paratroopers. In the fog of this conflict, lines blurred between resistance and revenge. Executions, ambushes, betrayals. Entire towns were annihilated for the actions of a few. Atrocities piled high. There was the Ardeatine massacre. The people did not submit. They rose. Resistance spread further. Germans were ambushed in alleyways. Railcars were derailed. Propaganda was replaced with posters bearing the word. In retaliation for a partisan bombing that killed 33 German soldiers in Rome, the SS executed 335 Italian civilians, most of them young men, professors, priests. Landscapes scorched, shot in the back of the head, buried in caves. Their only crime, being alive in occupied territory. The land where Mussolini once screamed from balconies now echoed with the cries of those who fought for freedom. The message was clear. For every German life lost, 10 Italians would die. He now led a puppet state, the Italian Social Republic. But he was a ghost of his former self, powerless, humiliated, a man ruling in name only. While the SS and Wehrmacht ruled with iron fists, Germans fortified it, though never occupying the actual monastery. Still, the Allies believed it was being used as a forward observation post. So, they unleashed fury. The abbey was turned into rubble, its stones shattered by thunderous explosives. Yet, when the dust cleared, the Germans still held the heights. Every hill became a death trap. Every valley, a killing zone. His orders were simple: delay the Allies at all costs. Weakened, wounded, and exhausted, but determined, they scaled the cliffs and took the heights. Monte Cassino was liberated, but at a cost so heavy it haunted survivors for decades. No matter how many lives it took, the German 10th Army, hardened and ruthless, took defensive positions across the mountains, building fortifications that rivaled those of the Maginot Line. A young woman named Carla, just 17, led a cell of partisans through the Apennine Mountains. Armed with stolen rifles and burning memories of her slain father, she coordinated sabotage missions that destroyed fuel convoys and communication lines. She was eventually captured, tortured, and executed, but her name became legend, whispered through the hills like a war cry. The Gothic Line, they called it, and it was built with one purpose: bleed the enemy dry. Meanwhile, the Allies were frustrated. Rome had fallen, but the cost was enormous. But the blood spilled didn't weaken morale, it fueled it. Resistance fighters, Italian partisans, took up arms fueled by vengeance and patriotism. They had seen their towns burned, their families tortured, their homes turned to ash. The ground soaked in blood, but from it rose something powerful: rage. Yet for every bomb dropped, German engineers patched the lines. War had become a race of attrition, of whose endurance would snap first. That rage became resolve, and that resolve spread across the entire region like wildfire. They fought from forests, mountains, and sewers. They disrupted German supply lines, assassinated officers, and gathered intelligence for the Allies. In many towns, they became ghosts that haunted the occupiers, striking and disappearing like shadows. In one village, a German unit executed every male over the age of 14 for collaborating with partisans. Mothers were forced to watch. Elsewhere, Allied bombers soared above. Railways were blown to dust. Supply depots ignited like firestorms. The Battle of Monte Cassino became a symbol of this agony. Thousands died trying to climb that mountain. Units from Britain, India, New Zealand, and Poland stormed the slopes again and again. Eventually, it was the Polish Second Corps that broke through. Meanwhile, the German grip on northern Italy remained strong. Civil war raged. Italians fought Italians, brother against brother. But in the shadows of these horrors, bravery endured. And then? But that message backfired. By late 1944, the Allies had broken through the Gothic Line, but the victory was hollow. So much had been lost. Towns reduced to rubble, families torn apart. Yet, through all the devastation, a strange, powerful truth emerged. Italy, once a fascist empire, had become a crucible of courage. And this was only the beginning of Germany's unraveling. Berlin was no longer a city. It was a bleeding wound on the face of Europe. Streets were reduced to scars of rubble. Buildings were skeletons, hollow and silent. Yet inside those ruins, the final act of the Third Reich was being written. In blood, fire, and betrayal. Deep within his bunker, Adolf Hitler raged against the ghosts of his empire. Maps were meaningless now. Divisions no longer answered. Cities were lost overnight. He issued orders to armies that no longer existed, demanding counteroffensives from phantoms. Every street was a battlefield, every window a sniper's nest, every basement a last stand. Soviet tanks ground through the debris, their turrets searching for resistance. Hours later, as Soviet shells exploded above, they both took their lives. The once mighty dictator, who had promised a 1,000-year Reich, was reduced to ashes and whispers in a concrete tomb. Flamethrowers scorched out pockets of fanatics. Grenades cleared hallways once filled with laughter. The nightmare that began in 1939 ended in ruins and silence, but peace did not immediately follow. The world now had to reckon with the consequences. The shattered nations, the buried millions, the ghosts that would never be laid to rest. The city screamed, but no one could stop the end now. The Reich was collapsing around him, but he refused to face it. Meanwhile, above the bunker, hell had arrived. Mothers buried their sons. Children wandered, hollow-eyed, looking for parents who would never return. One by one, the inner circle either fled, poisoned themselves, or were captured by advancing forces. The Nazi high command, which had ruled with iron cruelty, vanished like rats leaving a sinking ship. The Wehrmacht was no longer defending. It was disintegrating. The Soviets surged into Berlin with an unstoppable fury. German civilians, abandoned by their leaders, dug graves with bare hands. Inside the bunker, paranoia reached its peak. Hitler married Eva Braun in the gloom of death. It was a union of delusion and despair. Joseph Goebbels followed. On May 2, 1945, the last defenders of Berlin surrendered. The red banner was raised over the Reichstag, a symbol not just of victory, but of vengeance. The Soviets had paid with over 80,000 lives to break the Nazi capital. The cost was staggering. But for them, it was justice carved into stone. And then it was over. Germany was defeated. Hitler was dead. The Allies stood victorious. But victory carried a question. What comes after the war? When the ashes settle and the guns fall silent, the world was about to find out.